Delia Ramirez didn't just criticize Kristi Noem, she exposed a pattern of abuse, corruption, and authoritarian overreach that should alarm every American.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. A few weeks ago, right from this dais, I talked about the hypocrisy of these Republican policies. We're talking about gutting services that working people rely on while writing blank checks for ultra-wealthy bosses. Well, here we are again. We're back from recess, and Republicans are looking to cut $1.5 trillion in funding for our communities. But today, we're considering also a $69 billion infusion into an agency that is violating our rights, undermining due process, and blaming administrative errors for their criminal behavior. And this gift to Trump and Noem comes without oversight, which Republicans on this committee have proven either unwilling or incapable of. Case in point, my request to conduct an oversight visit in El Salvador was publicly denied in the press, despite evidence that Noem spent $6 million of taxpayer dollars to disappear immigrants to a foreign prison without due process. The committee is considering this massive infusion of capital into the department without holding a single hearing with Secretary Noem, a request that I have made and others several times to this body, and I'm making again today. Secretary Noem has to come before this body and answer our questions about the department's unconstitutional, illegal, and inhumane activities. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a letter requesting Noem come before the committee to testify. In case, I can keep going, I can do it at the end if you'd like.
We can do it now. So ordered.
Thank you. In case there's any question about what those unconstitutional, illegal, inhumane activities are, let's revisit some of them for the record. Republicans are seeking to fund the wasteful spending of this administration after Trump and Noem already wasted $300 million in 6 weeks to militarize the border. The administration says they're committed to legal immigration, while they are cruelly canceling the appointments of thousands of immigrants who legally sought asylum in our country. Trump and Noem have even denied children, 2-year-old children, their basic right to face immigration proceedings with a lawyer, including children going through cancer treatment. Since January, Trump and Noem have used ICE to terrorize our communities, profiling Latinos and arresting U.S. citizens, like the man who was detained in Chicago after buying a slice of pizza, despite of the fact the guy was carrying his ID and his Social Security card, and the Puerto Rican veteran in New Jersey. Folks, these are the same people who launched a $200 million anti-immigrant ad propaganda campaign with your constituent taxpayer dollars. And then, last month, in violation of court orders, Secretary Noem acted on the fascist dreams of her leader and sent immigrants to offshore detention centers. Noem wasted millions to fly immigrants without criminal records to Guantanamo. And then, she decided to enter into a $6 million deal with El Salvador government to disappear and mistakenly deport a legal resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, in addition, a hairdresser, soccer players, 8 women to a men's prison, and a long list of immigrants with no criminal records. The list includes a young man from Chicago whose family had no idea how to reach him after recognizing him in an authoritarian propaganda video of Noem touring the prison. All while Trump, Noem, and Rubio weaponize immigration enforcement against activists and dissenting voices like legal permanent resident Mahmoud Khalil, international student Rumisa Ozturk, and labor rights organizer Alfredo Lelo Juarez. In 3 months, Trump and Noem have abused the power of the Department of Homeland Security to pursue a campaign of persecution, of mass incarceration, and deportation. Day after day, Noem disregards the authority of Congress, the laws of the land, the constitutional rights of residents, the court's due process, and every check and balance that protects us from fascist authoritarians. There is no way in hell that I'm giving this administration $1 more to violate our rights and criminalize our communities. And further, Noem must resign from her position as Secretary of Homeland Security. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a letter demanding Noem's resignation as the Secretary of Homeland Security.
So ordered, and I believe the gentlelady's time has expired.
It is now. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Okay, she yields. Just to let everybody know, I think Secretary Noem's coming in May the 14th. But anyway, who's next? Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you.
Representative Delia Ramirez didn't come to that committee hearing to mince words. She came to draw a line in the sand. Her remarks cut to the heart of something far deeper than partisan politics. She was sounding the alarm on what she called unconstitutional, illegal, and inhumane actions by the Department of Homeland Security under Secretary Kristi Noem's leadership, and the larger culture of impunity that's been allowed to fester within it. From the very start of her remarks, Ramirez makes it clear that what's at stake here isn't just budgetary priorities, it's the moral compass of the nation. She points out the hypocrisy of Republicans demanding deep cuts to services that working people rely on, while simultaneously pushing to funnel $69 billion into an agency she says is actively violating human rights and undermining due process. The contrast is as striking as it is disturbing. Austerity for the poor, blank checks for state-sanctioned cruelty. And Ramirez doesn't deal in vague accusations. She brings receipts. She details reports of immigrants, including children and U.S. citizens, being detained, deported, or even disappeared under the guise of border enforcement. She cites the horrifying case of DHS allegedly spending $6 million to secretly transfer immigrants to a foreign prison in El Salvador, an act she calls not just illegal, but deeply authoritarian in nature. According to Ramirez, those detained include people with no criminal records, a hairdresser, soccer players, and even 8 women sent to a men's prison. She also points to the case of a man from Chicago whose family only discovered his fate when they saw him in a propaganda video, filmed to showcase Secretary Noem touring that very prison. It's a chilling example of state power used not for justice or safety, but for spectacle and intimidation. Ramirez ties all of this to a larger pattern, one where government power is weaponized to silence dissent, target activists, and spread fear in immigrant and Latino communities. She cites the persecution of labor organizers, students, and lawful residents, connecting these actions to what she describes as a campaign of persecution, mass incarceration, and deportation. In her words, this isn't immigration policy, it's political repression masquerading as law enforcement. And that's the key insight here. Ramirez is forcing the country to confront a truth many would rather ignore. Immigration policy, in the wrong hands, can become a tool of authoritarianism. What she's describing isn't just bureaucratic overreach, it's the erosion of constitutional rights under the banner of security. She reminds the committee and the public that DHS was never meant to be a political weapon. It was designed to protect the nation from external threats, not to terrorize communities within it or circumvent the rule of law. Her call for Secretary Noem to testify before Congress and ultimately to resign isn't just symbolic. It's a demand for accountability, transparency, and a restoration of basic democratic norms. Because when an agency can act without oversight, when it can deport people without hearings, detain children without legal counsel, or disappear lawful residents into foreign prisons, that's not democracy. That's the machinery of authoritarian power running unchecked. There's also something profoundly human in Ramirez's tone. You can hear the exhaustion, but also the defiance of someone who's tired of seeing communities scapegoated and dehumanized. She's not speaking as a politician posturing for headlines. She's speaking as someone representing real families who are suffering the consequences of a system that too often treats them as disposable. And this is what separates her moment from the usual partisan back and forth. Ramirez isn't just opposing a policy, she's defending a principle that human rights, due process, and constitutional limits still matter. That power, no matter who holds it, must answer to the people. Her message also resonates beyond immigration. It's about what happens when fear becomes the currency of governance, and when law and order becomes a shield for abuse. Because today it's immigrants and asylum seekers, but history shows that unchecked power never stops at one group. The erosion of rights anywhere is a warning to everyone. Delia Ramirez's speech is a call to conscience. She's saying we can't afford to normalize cruelty. We can't keep writing blank checks for agencies that operate outside the law. And we can't claim to be a nation of laws if we look the other way when those laws are broken by the very people entrusted to uphold them. And whether or not Secretary Noem ever appears before Congress to answer for these actions, the message Ramirez delivered today will linger. It's a reminder that oversight is not optional, it's the backbone of democracy, and that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That's what made her words so powerful. They weren't just directed at Kristi Noem, they were directed at all of us. Because the question Ramirez leaves hanging in the air is simple but profound. If we accept this, if we accept a government that disappears people, silences critics, and breaks its own laws, then what kind of country are we becoming? And that's why moments like this matter. Because democracy doesn't die in a single day. It dies by degrees, with every abuse that goes unchallenged. So yes, Delia Ramirez demanded accountability. But more importantly, she reminded us what accountability is for. This isn't about party politics, it's about the soul of a nation. If you value voices that speak truth to power and push back against the normalization of cruelty, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Left Lens, and share this story, because awareness is the first step to accountability.